Welcome to the Pandemonium Witches podcast, where the ADHD has just a touch of autism, where the true crime is as scary as the hauntings and unsolved cases. But the hosts never stay on topic for long. I'm Kat.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Em.
And I'm Meg.
Keep your arms, legs, and other extremities in the vehicle at all times, and enjoy the show. Do I have to?
Good mornings, but do we have to what?
Be human? Be here?
Human, unfortunately, because that's, the breed that we are. As for being here, here is relevant.
Oh my god, I'm delirious. I went to bed at 11 and woke up at 5.
Late?
Well, we were watching The Rookie.
Uh-huh.
And we ended up, God, I want to say 10. We started to try and get ready for bed.
Uh-huh.
And then finally went to bed at like 11.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
My legs got cold. Not the rest of me, just my legs.
I tried to explain to Josh that when I get cold, it's not my arms. It's
right,
my legs and my feet.
Because poor circulation.
Right. That doesn't even make any sense. I don't like it when he sends me like messages that are like military speak, because I have no idea.
Sir, I don't understand the language with which you speak.
It's fine. So your sister had a story, which is one of the episodes that I'm currently editing for Galveston. Do you want me to read it before we go into what we're talking about today? Okay. So Dr. Sister and her soon-to-be hubby went and did a weekend in Galveston in 2022. It reads as follows. We were on a ghost tour pub crawl. Like every other ghost tour I've ever done, I wasn't expecting El Spoopy. But history and some fun stops. Where we were going along the tour, we had made a stop at one bar, and we were learning history. We'd stop like a half a block away from a building that has construction stuff up all over it, and our tour guide starts telling us that this building is forever locked up because people would go in and jump from the top.
The fuck? Guys, don't do that.
It's one of the tallest in Galveston. She proceeds...
Okay, that kind of makes sense,
yeah,
though.
She proceeds... I mean, you guys, don't do that. Don't actually do that.
That's how you die, and we prefer our listeners to be living.
Yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, I am a walking Ouija board. I prefer not to turn that on if I can avoid it. So
I avoid it as much as possible.
She proceeds to tell us about, I would hope you do. You can't leave me here with all of these normal people. Also normal.
No, I meant hearing ghosts.
Oh, yeah, that too. She proceeds to tell us about the numerous bodies that have been found at the bottom of the building throughout the last 15 years. And then we move on.
15 years is a long time.
We have now walked down the block and turned the corner so we can get around the building because there's so much fencing now that you have to go down and around it. We come back up the alley that would have been between it and the next building to it if it wasn't all fenced off, and I hear this scream, like blood curdling, and I'm being unalived scream.
Nope.
So
no thanks.
Funny enough, she says, so I paused for a second, and I'm like, nope. And I start pulling other half forward because whatever that is, it's none of my business. We get past the building and I look up behind the group of 4 of us and all are looking real freaked out. One of them goes, did you hear it too? And I said, what did you hear? Someone screaming? Yep, heard it too. Other half goes, nobody was screaming. She responds with, "Babe, someone screamed like they were being murdered, and only half of us heard it." And then she sent a gif of Shadow crawling back into the darkness. Like, me and half the group behind us. Nobody in the front half of the tour group heard shit. I'm good.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I mean, her other half is like kind of deaf, so because he was a firefighter.
Oh, yeah. No,
So
I just blew out my
kind of lost his
eardrums.
hearing after a little bit.
I just blew out my eardrums because I'm stupid.
I mean, I'm sure he probably did too, but
Yeah, I mean that's true. So, of course, because when we're airing this episode, it is the sort of the worst holiday of the year, but also the best holiday of the year. It's gluttonous fat bitch. Yes, it's gluttonous fat bitch holiday. So instead of doing something on Thanksgiving, because
fuck that shit.
look, if you don't know the history about actual colonization, I'm going to be doing it. I think we talked about doing the story later about the colony schools.
Uh-huh.
There's far too many people that have passed away to do just like one episode. It has to be a couple.
Yeah,
so
it's a lot.
It is a lot. So instead, I decided to. Who's at my front door? I have one of those blink cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, we're doing.
Was it a bug?
I think so, because that's what happened earlier. Just a moth flew by.
Flew by. It happens.
It's a cat.
Even better.
Just a cat, just strolling along. You can just see a little bit of his tail. So, instead of doing just regular colonization, I'm doing a specific story about colonization that has to do with missing persons.
Oh boy.
So, I'm sure you know about it. Let's see here.
I think so. I also want to say Christopher Columbus is the reason why syphilis got brought to Europe.
Yes! And herpes.
Yep.
Smallpox.
He couldn't keep shit in his pants.
Yeah, smallpox was from the blankets because there was body lice on the blankets, scabies.
Well, no, he brought that over. I'm saying that when he went back to Europe, he brought.
Oh yeah, yeah, most definitely.
Because he couldn't keep shit in his pants. He couldn't. It was fucking animals.
He was.
He really was, and I feel so bad for the animals.
Well, not just that, but I mean, we do talk about a terrible person today.
No boy.
So, because I know it's been discussed before that I this is a hill I will die on. Pocahontas was a minor, and I got into a really
OR, not ER.
Yes. Not minor with a pickaxe. Minor pigtails.
Child.
Child. So, a chillin'. So, I got into an argument with a guy who was like, "Oh my god, Pocahontas was so hot." I was like, "Pocahontas was like 8.
Right.
She was a child. She was supposed to be wed to this guy," and I, showed everything. And he's just like, "No, that's totally wrong. She married John Smith." And I was like, "She was colonized by John Smith." So,
she was supposed to marry her
arranged marriage.
Arranged husband.
Yes.
When she came of age.
Yep. Which was, I think, like 12 or 13, whatever. But John Smith said, "Fuck that."
But still.
Yeah.
She was a literal child. And to reference, today, she would have been in elementary school.
Yep. So, now that we've had our little soapboxes, there is a spooky story that is based out of Virginia proper. Of course, we're going to go over the histories of Virginia, North Carolina, and West Virginia. It's called Croatoan.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Doesn't it have to do with Roanoke?
Yes, the Lost City of Roanoke. So, I do a little bit of back history, like we do.
Always.
So, of course, Croatoan is a term that refers to multiple things, including a Native American tribe, which is Croatan, 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 not Croatoan, it's Croatan. And the word carved into a tree on Roanoke Island. It is a small Native American group who also lived on the coast of what is now North Carolina. The story Croatoan may have been related to the larger Roanoke people or have been allied with them. So there is an island called Croatoan, not Croatan, which is the name of the tribe, but Croatoan.
Yes.
The island is now known as Hatteras Island.
Interesting.
Do you want to know why?
Yes.
Because there was a lot of hat shops on the island.
Ah.
Which, they're called haberdasheries, not hatters.
They are.
Yes, that's what the Mad Hatter was supposed to be named, not Hatter. He was a haberdasher.
Yes.
So the word Croatoan was carved into a tree in Roanoke Island in 1590. So we're going way back in the day. The word was found by John White, who was relieved to see it because he thought that the colonists had moved to somewhere else. So he was relieved that they had moved somewhere close. The word may be a combination of two Algonquin words, which means town talk or council town. This would suggest that it was the home of an important leader and a place where councils would be held. Like council meetings.
Interesting.
So the fate of the Roanoke colonists still remain a mystery to this day, but there are several theories. The first one is the one that was published in all of our history books, which was later constituted as a lie, was that they were killed or abducted by natives. The second one is that the colonists tried to sail back to England, but got lost at sea. The third was that the colonists were killed by Spaniards who marched up from Florida, which that's not where they had come from.
But also, if they had been killed, there would have been bodies.
There would have been bodies, yeah.
Like, there would have been signs of a fight, signs of a struggle, and there wasn't. Everything was just deserted.
The last one was the colonists moved inland and were absorbed into a friendly tribe, which I do discuss later because that is the number one possibility of what happened.
I was about to say that is much more likely considering that they were running out of supplies when old dude went back with the ship to England.
Right.
And it would just make sense that the natives took pity on these poor starving people and took them in.
Which is probably what ended up happening.
Yeah.
I go into full deep dive because you know me. This is one of my things.
Yes, of course.
I was obsessed with this growing up because I was obsessed with the story of Pocahontas. And then I researched it, came out. I was like 12 when the movie Pocahontas came out. And we did a little backyard play in my friend's backyard. It was a whole thing. I come running out of my bedroom with this history book I got from my teacher. And I went, she was a kid and he was 30? And she went, whoa, hold on. What are you researching? And I told her what happened. And
unfortunately.
Yeah. So there were a lot of colonists who had originally joined the mission from England to America. They were hoping to discover lots and lots of gold and silver because that's what they were promised.
Hey guys, there was no gold and silver.
Not there. No. That was on the West Coast.
Yes. They were on the wrong side of the continent.
Yeah, they were. That's and actually the East Coast was known for like coal and precious stones like amethyst.
Yeah, because that's what was there.
Right. So, when no such sources were located, these men became dispirited and decided the entire operation was just a waste of time.
Well, no shit.
The English also researched where the local natives attained their copper, but never tracked the metal to its actual origin.
I mean, makes sense.
Right. So the colonists spent the autumn of 1585 acquiring corn from the neighboring villages, because at this point, remember, they still didn't know how to farm anything.
Right.
Um,
And even if they did, they didn't know how to farm on that soil.
Correct.
And they didn't have any, farming equipment.
So they had apparently obtained enough corn along with venison, fish, and oysters to sustain them through the winter. Because this was back when they were making smoking huts and stuff like that, and that's what they used for their meats. And salting. Yeah. Little information survives from the actual notations, but what transpired at the colony between September 85 and March 86 made a full assessment of the winter impossible to figure out. So the colonists most likely exhausted their English provisions, which is what they brought over from the ship, and American corn by October, resulting in monotony of their remaining food, and no doubt contributed to the low morale of men, because they sucked.
Right.
So the Native Americans in that region had likely encountered or at least observed Europeans from previous expeditions.
Mm-hmm.
The Secotans, who controlled Roanoke Island and the mainland between Albemarle Sound and the Pamlico River. Words are hard. Soon made contact with the English and established friendly relations. So the Secotan chief, Wingina, had recently been injured in war with the Pamlico. And his brother, these are really hard names to pronounce, by the way. I spent all day yesterday trying to figure out how to fucking pronounce these.
I ain't got a clue.
No, not at all. But I'm trying. The fact is that I'm trying because I care. It's his brother's name is Granganimo. Granganimo represented the tribe in his place. Upon their return to England in the autumn of 84, two of the colonists, Amadas and Barlow, spoke highly of the tribe's hospitality and the strategic location of Roanoke, because at this time,
right,
it was a fort.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's where the whole Pocahontas thing came in. Anyways, so they brought back two natives, Wanches, a Secoan and a Manto, and a Croatoan, whose mother was the chieftain of the island. The expedition's report described a region as pleasant and bountiful land, known as the Garden of Eden. Although these accounts may have been embellished by Raleigh, who's the guy on the movie Pocahontas that's very fat with a tiny pug dog.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, all of the photos I have found look like that.
Just minus the pug dog.
No, he had a tiny dog.
Well, the pug dog didn't look like the pug dog in the movie.
No, that looks like a more recent. This one, it didn't have, his face wasn't scrunched like normal pug dogs.
Right, because nowadays pug dogs originally had full noses.
Right, they did. So, Queen Elizabeth was impressed with the expedition, and in 1585, she knighted Raleigh, proclaiming the land granted to him is now called Virginia, and he was the Knight Lord and Governor of Virginia. So, do you know who Raleigh was? He wasn't just Captain Raleigh. Do you know what his whole name was?
He had like a...
It's not that long of a name. It's a kind of short name.
No, but he had titles and stuff.
Well, he's known for writing a really, really prominent thing in history. His name is Sir Walter Raleigh.
Ah, yeah.
He also did a bunch of terrible stuff to people.
Yeah.
So,
Like they all did.
right. So for the first colony, Virginia, he planned a large military operation and focused on exploration and evaluation of the natural resources. So the original amount was going to be less than 100. It was going to be only 69 people. But approximately 600 men were sent on the voyage, with about half intended to remain in the colony, followed by a second wave later, and they were going to send the rest back home. Ralph Lane was appointed governor of the colony, and Philip Amatus would serve as admiral, although fleet commander Sir Richard Grenville would lead the overall mission. So they had civilian attendants, which are kind of like local sheriffs, as they were.
Yeah.
Joaquin Gans, metallurgist, Thomas Harriot, scientist John White, Thomas Harriot was a scientist, and John White, who was an artist. Manteo and Wanchese, returning home from their visit to England, were also passengers on the voyage. So not only did they take the natives away from their home, took them overseas, met the Queen, came back home. So Amata spent...
They're lucky that they even survived the journey back and forth, let alone exposure to all these
new
diseases that they don't have any immunizations for.
None, like at all. So our home dude Amatus spent the winter exploring Chesapeake, traveling as far as Cape Henry and then the James River. While I just realized I'm echoing a lot. Hold on.
Okay.
Too old. My bones. My bones.
My joints.
Oh my god. Okay, this sounds a lot better. I turned the fan. I keep forgetting when we record, I have to turn the fan on. I mean, I was like, good God, because it pushes the sound back down. Yeah. So, Wallace Purdy make contact with the Chesapeake villages of, believe it or not, it's called Chesapeake because of the actual name. It's Chesapeake. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce this because it sounds very foul. It's S-K-I-C-O over the A. Over the O. So the Secotans had described the I'm just going to call them ski coats, as the largest city in the region, possibly leading the English to expect something like wealthy Inca or Aztec, which is what the Spaniards had found originally in sort of Central America. Amatus instead found a more modest settlement, although he was impressed with the area's climate and the soil quality. So Harriet and Gans explored Virginia, meeting native tribes and taking stock of like all the natural resources.
Yeah.
During the travels, though, him and his assistants collected data that would eventually produce White's La Virginia Pars map, which is the Virginia that they use in the state capital for Virginia. It's
interesting.
It's really cool. If you haven't gone, you should go. I don't know if they have it up anymore, though. It may be back in records, but I know they put it up for like centennials and stuff like that. So, although 16th century science could not explain the phenomenon, Harriet noticed that each town the colonists visited quickly suffered a deadly epidemic, which may have been influenza or smallpox. Nah, really?
I mean, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck.
It's a horse.
I was going to say it's a goose, but okay.
So some of the Secotan suspected the disease was caused by the supernatural, which the English somehow unleashed onto their tribes. Winginga, which we talked about earlier, he fell sick and his own people couldn't treat him, but he recovered after requesting prayers from the English.
Interesting.
Impressed, he asked the colonists to share this power with the other stricken communities, which hastened the spread of the disease.
No shit.
This was likely, the epidemic was likely and had a severe impact on the fall harvest at a time when Lane's colony would have been heavily dependent on its neighbors and supplement its limited food supply. Excuse me. So by spring, the Secotan and the colony were strained, most likely due to the over-reliance on the natives' food.
Right.
And then there was the death of our home dude Grange. He was a huge, powerful advocate for the colony and helped turn the original chieftain, which was Winginga, against the English.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up changing his name to Pemi-Sapan, which is the one who watches, suggesting a newly cautious and vigilant policy, and moved his tribe to a temporary tribal capital on Roanoke Island. Of course, the colonists, being as smart as they were, didn't recognize this.
Of course not.
So in March, Lane consulted Pemi-Sapan about a plan to explore the mainland beyond Secotan territory, and he supported the plan and advised Lane on the Roanoke leader, Menatonin, was meeting with his allies in a plan to attack the English, and that 3,000 warriors had gathered at Chanonoak. So at the time, he had sent word to this other tribe that the English was coming and was trying to ensure that there was going to be hostilities, but everybody needed to remain sort of civil.
Right.
So when Lane showed up, super heavily armed, the representatives of Roanoke, Maganoke, Wimpabanock, and Maturik showed up not armed. They were not planning an attack, and Lane had actually caught them by surprise instead.
Oh, wow.
So, of course, because they're colonists, what do you think they did?
Shot first, ask questions later?
Yep. They captured a good chunk of the tribes, and from the research that I saw, not a lot of them survived.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So, Menatonin, he described a huge king in the northeast, possibly from the notes due to Powhatan, warning that Lane should bring a considerable force if he sought to make contact. He also corroborated rumors that Lane heard about a sea just beyond the Roanoke River. And then, based on the information that Lane was given, he gave a detailed plan to his forces. One went up the Chowton River, and the other one the Atlantic coast to resettle in Chesapeake. So I go on to this huge deep dive of 20 pages about everything.
As we do.
We're not going to go into that. So obviously, colonists are assholes. Shot and killed a bunch of people.
Full stop.
Took their kids. Raped, murder, pillage, whole 9 yards, right? So we're going to go do. Here we go. So I'm going to just say a couple of things. So June of 86, colonists made contact with Sir Francis Drake on his way back from England. He was going to Santo Domingo, Cartagena, and St. Augustine. But there was a raid on his boat. He Sir Francis Drake, acquired refugees, slaves, and hardware with the intent on delivering them to the colony in Raleigh. But by that point, there was a bunch of misfortune. There was a lot of sickness and not a lot of food. So he's like, second thought, we're going to go somewhere else.
Makes sense.
So, because the colony was founded in 1585, it was visited in 5 years later, by the original founder, Raleigh, who had gone back to get provisions because he's like, my people are starving. I need to get antibiotics and other medication and all this other shit.
And tools and all the things.
Well, he couldn't go back because the Queen of England was expecting a huge fight with the Spanish Armada. So all the ships were held.
Right.
So by 1588, they finally released him because typically boat from over there to here was about a year to a year and a half as far as sailing goes.
With good weather.
With good weather. So they left in 1588. They didn't arrive back in the States until 1590. So at this point, the whole town is a ghost town, and the only thing that they can find is Croatoan carved into a tree.
Yeah.
So, of course, it wasn't just on one tree. So that was the story, is that all of this stuff happened, but it was on a set of 3 trees. So when you looked at it, it spelt out Croatoan.
Right, because they were sounding it out kind of thing.
Right. So...
because not a lot of people knew how to spell, let alone read.
Right. So, of course, there was a lot of Algonquin linguistics that was looked into over the years. And archaeological remains of at least 2 other Croatan villages have been located elsewhere on Hatteras Island. Not just the ones close to Raleigh. Or Virginia, for that matter. Raleigh's in North Carolina. So,
just kidding.
The total of colonists that disappeared was between 112 to 121. Because you have to remember, there were people that were pregnant at that time.
Right.
So we don't know if they ever actually gave birth or not.
And also, wasn't Raleigh's like daughter or daughter-in-law and grandchild in the colony?
Yup, we're getting there. So, not
to jump ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Let's make sure I remembered correctly.
Oh, yeah. So, the original Jamestown colonists produced a report where the Roanoke settlers were massacred. These stories were the ones that were sent to Europe, and despite that, no evidence was actually found to the contrary. So, scrolling. That is not what I want to read.
Just kidding, guys.
This was like all before everything happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where's the ships? Genocide. Yep, already talked about that. Oh, okay. So, Raleigh had originally left, gone overseas, and he gave misinformation to the Queen, stating that he was going back, but he didn't go back. He had 2 ships. One went back to Raleigh. He, on the other hand, went down south because he was looking for El Dorado.
Of course.
So I put in quotes, fucking colonizers. Also, you remember the...
He never found it either.
Right. No, he didn't. And you remember the fuckboy we talked about, John Smith?
Yeah.
Following the Jamestown settlement in 1607, John Smith was captured by the Powhatan and met both with their leader, Chief Powhatan, and his brother, Openhawenkawa. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. So they described him as men who wore European style clothing and called him unknown. Later, Smith returned to the colony, made arrangements with the king of the natives, and the colony produced a crude map of the region with labels for the surrounding native villages. The original map contained a place, Pacracanic, with a note indicating, "Here remaineth 4 men clothed that came from Roanoke to Oceankawa." So in 1608, Smith sent a letter with all of this information, known commonly as the Zunigan map, which was originally rediscovered in 1890. So then I talk about how he's a fuckboy and what all the bunch of other stuff that he did. We can go into that
Went
later.
off on a little tangent there.
I did for like 10 fucking pages.
I love it.
So nope, that's still him. Okay. So yeah, it was his wife, his daughter, and his granddaughter.
Okay.
That was taken by the local thing. I made like a tiny little...
They were taken in
by
the local.
Yeah, they were taken in by them. They weren't actually taken. They were taken in. But it's literally like one sentence. His daughter was the first that was actually born in Virginia. So her name was actually Virginia Raleigh.
Right.
Which I think is funny because there's a small town in Virginia called Raleigh, and there's also a Raleigh, North Carolina. Anyways, besides the point. So we're going to talk about more recent findings. So in 1998, a team led by climatologist David Stahl from the University of Arkansas and archaeologist Dennis Blayton from William & Mary College concluded that an extreme drought occurred in the Tidewater region, which was where I was at, between 1587 to 89. Which was right... Yeah, it was right before they just disappeared. So, they found a tree, cut it down, obviously, as they do. They studied growth rings, which are those little rings inside the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And it was data from 1185 to 1984.
Oh, wow.
So, specifically, 1587 was measured as the worst growing season for the entire 800-year period.
I mean, between droughts and environmental issues, it happens.
And the findings were consistent with the concerns of the Croatoan expressed about their food supply. Also, in 1998, they found a unique find, a 10-karat gold signet ring engraved with a lion or a horse believed to date back to the 16th century, so the 1500s.
Right.
So the ring's discovery prompted later excavations at a site led by Mark Horton, an archaeologist at Britain's Bristol University, who has been directing volunteers for the Croatoan Archaeological Society in actual digs since 2009, where I got a good chunk of this information.
Love that.
I love university papers because they have everything.
Right. And they are completely unbiased and call shit like they see it.
Oh, yeah, it's terrible. There was like 10 pages about
hilarious.
How 4 of the original colonizers were like terrible humans. And
yeah, I know. I love it.
I was like, holy shit. So
I love it.
Horton's team recently found a small piece of slate that seems to have been used as a writing tablet and part of an iron rapier. It was dated around late 16th century, so roughly around the time they disappeared.
Okay.
And this was along other artifacts of European and Native American design. Then there was a slate, another slate, smaller than the one that was found in Jamestown, which was located earlier, bears a letter M, barely visible in the corner, and it was found alongside a lead pencil.
I mean, it makes sense.
Well, in 2005, there was a computer scientist, Roberta Estes, and she found several organizations for DNA analysis and genealogical research.
Mm-hmm.
Her interest of the disappearance of the 1587 colony motivated various projects to establish a genetic link between the colonists and potential Native American descendants.
Oh boy! Because, when they interbreed, things happen.
You see, when a male genome meets a female genome. So, autosomal DNA for this purpose is unreliable. So little of the colonizers' genetic material would remain after 5 or 6 generations.
Right.
However, testing the Y chromosomes and mitochondrial DNA is more reliable over large spans of time.
The mitochondrial house.
Yes! It's powerhouse of the cell. So the main challenge of this is to obtain a genetic point of comparison. While it's conceivable for the DNA from 430-year-old bones, there is yet no bones from the lost colony to work with.
I mean, because if they got assimilated into the tribe, then wherever the tribe went, the bones went with. And so obviously, like, the area that they would be looking in isn't the right spot.
Right. Because they always want to be looking in the spot where the colonists were last, or the native tribes were last. But that's
not where the bodies end up.
Yeah. So, my husband's so funny. So in November of 2011, researchers of the First Colony Foundation noticed 2 corrective patches on White's 1585 map, which was the PARS I talked about earlier.
Right.
So at their request, the British Museum actually examined the original map on a light table.
Interesting.
One of the patches of the area where the Roanoke and Chowan tribes was found, it covers a symbol representing a fort at the head of Albemarle Sound. The faint outline of a fort drawn in was invisible ink.
Because somebody erased it and covered it. Because it was no longer there.
Probably, yeah. So one theory is that White had been trying to conceal the fort from the Spanish, or the other was that the Spanish had sent an armada in to defeat the colony, but didn't find any of the settlers.
I mean, that would be possible,
right?
But by that point, the settlers, the colonists would have already had to have left, because otherwise, again, no signs of battle, no signs of trauma, no bodies. That's the biggest thing, is
the no bodies.
The lack of bodies there. Aside, like, there were already some bodies, but those were dated before Raleigh had left.
Right.
It's the space of time of him being gone is when no more bodies appeared.
Right.
Or got buried, and everybody just disappeared.
They just kind of just poofed.
Yep.
So, of course, we have to discuss the 16th century Wampanoag village that we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
So in 2012, the First Colony Foundation comes back again. They conducted an excavation at Site X, which is a site that is currently still off record. Are you taking a picture?
Not of you.
Okay. I was like, what did I do?
Nothing. Nothing this time.
Okay. So the group since then has found shards of pottery that they then claimed to have been used by the Roanoke settlers after they left the colony. Because it was a combination of English and native pottery.
Right. And if the natives were helping them, bringing them stuff, then it would make sense. And also, the native women showing the English women how to do things, then it would make sense that they would be showing them how to do the native way of making pottery.
Right. And it probably ended up saving them in the long run, too, because instead of them doing everything that they were taught in proper society, they're doing everything, quote unquote, improper way. But
because it ends up working in that environment.
Right.
Because, yes, the proper way works when you're back in England in a, city
Mm-hmm.
or just outside of a town. Whereas being in the wilderness, you can't do shit that way.
No. So,
It very quickly blows up in your face.
excuse me. So it has taken them a long time to be able to get through a lot of the grit and stuff that they've been researching.
Oh, yeah.
So by doing this archaeological dig, they may have found the actual small native town, Metaquin.
Oh, nice.
Which is cool. So after the Roanoke colony, quote unquote, met its end, the settlers eventually came south from Virginia to North Carolina. But the first recorded settler in the area didn't arrive until 1655. But the recently uncovered pottery is the style of borderware, which is typically pottery dug up on the Roanoke Island, as well as Jamestown, but is no longer imported to the New World after the 17th century. In addition, they also discovered other various items. A food storage jar, known as a baluster, pieces of early gun flintlocks, a metal hook used to stretch animal hides as an aglet,
yeah,
a small copper tube used to secure wool fibers before the advent of the hook and eye in the 17th century, and a couple of other pots and dishes and such.
Yeah.
So based on these findings, the original scientist believes that the Roanoke colonists may have moved inland to live with Native American allies sometime after White left before the cold. Which makes sense.
Right.
So, if you haven't hydrated yet, you should, because my throat. Drink, bitch, drink. Chug, 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 chug.
My caffeine.
I know. So, in October 2017, a statement from the FCF, which I'm just going to call them that from now on,
Makes sense.
reported finding fragments of Tudor-style pottery as well as weapons on the site as well.
Yeah, because, you kind of had to pick and choose what you could carry.
Right. So it's not like, they were saying that everything was gone from that area, which I'll talk about that in the next page.
Not so much gone as so much as buried.
They were picked apart.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, okay, if you see those apocalyptic movies and everything like that, you think that you can carry what's necessary, right? And it's only what you can carry on you.
Right. And if you also have children, you have to carry stuff that you need and then stuff they need.
Right.
All on you.
Right. So you essentially become the pack mule.
Possibly even carry the children.
Right. So, of course, the FCF states, everybody probably from this colony that we're uncovering is probably from the Lane and Raleigh colony.
Yeah.
But the trading post in this area wasn't established until the 1650s, which is the one that I already talked about with you personally. The one that's like super haunted, right, that I drove through, that I was like, fuck no, we're not stopping here. And Josh was like, come on, it'll be fun.
Fun for you. You are not a walking Ouija board.
Not me, bitch. Fuck no.
I don't have enough protections on me in place at all.
No. I mean, I do.
Going there.
I do, but just, we were on vacation, so I didn't take everything.
Right.
So, of course, in 2020, when science was getting a little bit better, in North Carolina, they think they found a burial site of the lost colony. So this was found 50 miles west of Roanoke Island. Analysis of the artifacts found nearby. Mind you, there's not a lot of bones. Only a little bit. Like, not a lot. Bones degrade over time. Especially with the soil that's in Virginia. It's very acidic.
Right. It eats the calcium out of it really fast.
Yeah. So they were found 50 miles west of Roanoke Island, and the analysis of the artifacts found were determined they might be from the lost colonies, and settlers from other colonies such as Jamestown had different items and different materials than the original Lost Colony settlers. For example, clay pipes, which were invented later in the early to mid 1600s. Another dig, an archaeologist from Bristol, Mark Harton, we talked about him earlier, he said he found part of a sword and part of a gun on Hatteras Island, and it may have been conclusive proof that the settlers did assimilate with the Native Americans because it was buried with a tribal settlement.
Yeah, that would make sense. Because the gun they would have used until they ran out of materials, ammunition, black powder, everything, and then they would pick apart the pieces of it and used it for other things.
Right.
And probably the same thing with the sword is they probably broke it apart so that way they could use it for other things.
Right. I mean, my grandfather had the same knife for the longest time. Mm-hmm. And he used it so often that it went from a regular butcher's knife to a fillet knife.
Right, because sharpening it after a while, it
got that curve to it.
You're taking off bits of the metal each time.
Right. So I have 3 of these knives. One of them is at Emily's house. I'm keeping it there because it was too heavy to take with me, and I know she'll take good care of it. I have the other 2. That's what matters. So, in addition to all of these things that were found since the early 1990s, right?
Right.
Native Americans lacked metallurgical technology, so they are believed to be European in origin. That's what some of the DNA shows. Mark Horton told Nat Geo that some of the artifacts his team found are trade items, but it appears that others may belong to the actual colonists themselves. The evidence is that they assimilated with the natives, but kept all of their goods, which sounds about right.
Right.
So, based on the clues that were left behind by the actual colonists, it appeared that they were murdered by the natives, but there was no blood.
There's no bodies.
No bodies. The trunks for Raleigh and his entire family were picked through. The important items were taken.
Right.
So, like a photo of Raleigh, like a painting.
Mm-hmm.
The family Bible, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
you would not just leave that behind.
Right. So she took that.
And if the natives had massacred the whole
it would have been left behind.
Everything would have been left behind except for the weapons, the food, utensils, like.
Well, a lot of the huts were actually taken apart, which is why I was like, why are they thinking they were murdered? People wouldn't take whole ass sides of houses. But they dismantled parts of how.
So that way they could make sleds and stuff to pull the stuff with.
Right. So.
Because if they had animals, if they had, cows or horses or, even goats, they, pack animals, they could, make like I want to call it a lean-to, but I know that's not exactly the word. But basically a sled attached to the animal and have the animal pull a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a sled. That's a sled.
Yeah, I know, but for some reason my brain was like lean-to, and I'm like, that is not the correct word.
It's a sled.
Lean-to is a building.
It's
lean-to is a building, Rachel.
So of course, this whole thing has been a huge, like, ghost story that's been told hundreds of times over,
Yeah.
It's not right, I mean, I've been to Roanoke. There's a lot of, like, settlers and stuff like that are still hanging around, but nothing that they're thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, of course, because of this whole ghost story, it's been in dozens of different media. So, of course, I had to put it in.
Oh, yeah.
So, Croatoan has taken on a paranormal quality in Harlan Ellison's 1975 short story, Croatoan, and Stephen King's 1999 television miniseries, Storm of the Century, which, fun fact, it was actually kind of good.
That's good.
He is also the name of a human-like villain portrayed by Shatner in the 5th season of King's Haven, based on his novel, The Colorado Kid. I just can't take it anymore. And of course, there was an episode on Supernatural.
Yes, but that one was a little bit more wonky.
It was. Season 2, episode 9, Sam has a vision of Dean killing a young man who seems to be possessed by a demon. The two brothers head to Oregon, which is not where it's based, to search for answers. They come across a town contaminated by a deadly virus that drives to kill people. 1994 graphic novel, Batman vs. Spawn, War Devil. Croatoan is the name of a powerful demon in the 20th century who attempts to sacrifice the entirety of Gotham to Satan. Why is it always Satan? He just gets a bad rap.
He does.
So, in 2011, AHS, American Horror Story, stand for them, the episode Birth relates to a fictional legend in which the lost colonists mysteriously died, and their ghosts haunted the local natives until a tribal elder banished them with the word Croatoan.
Interesting.
The premise is expanded upon in the 6th season of the series, American Horror Story Roanoke, which I did watch, and it got a ton of stuff wrong, which, like it does, but
I mean,
it was thriller.
that's good.
The leader of the undead colonists, Butcher, is depicted as John White's wife, Thomason, although there are no historical evidence that she was one of the colonists. In 2015, there was a novel called The Last American Vampire. The colonists are victims of a vampire named Crawley. The inscription Crow was thus an incomplete attempt to implicate him, which we know now it was put on 3 trees, Croatoan. Anyways.
Yeah.
The race of Roanoke, also known as Lost Colony or Lost Colony, The Legend of Roanoke, is a 2007 sci-fi original supernatural period horror film. Say that 20 times fast. So the last one is Vanishing on 7th Street. It's a 2010 American post-apocalyptic film. It's got John Leguizamo in it. You know how much I love him. So, it says, on the 3rd day of darkness, Paul appears in the street, suffering from a severe concussion. He reveals that he had been taken by the darkness, but his headlamp had reactivated, and he reappeared in life. He tells them about the story of the Roanoke colony, where over 100 settlers disappeared overnight, and he seems to be experiencing the same thing. He tells them the word Croatoan was found carved into a fence post near the site of the empty colony. So, no one really knows what actually happened. Archaeologists are still trying to figure it out. I personally think, after deep diving on this for 30 some odd years, that they integrated themselves into society.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, from what my friend told me that is in a tribe up in Northern Virginia, her cousin has blonde hair and blue eyes, and both of her parents are native, and both their parents are native.
Genetics. Mm-hmm. It might be several generations later, but random shit pops up.
Right? Her brother has green eyes, and it's really funny, but I did get a screenshot of the map, which you can see
I'm the map. Sorry.
Okay. So I got the map here. And then this is what is in the Virginia history books, which I found on like 4 different websites.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not on one tree, but it's on 3 trees.
Okay.
So when you look at it from far away, it spells out Croatoan.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a story of Croatoan and the Lost City of Roanoke.
Oh,
There's literally a total of 27 pages. I broke it up into
I
like
figured.
2, so 10 pages is John Smith, and then the rest is 17 pages of. But I deleted the
A
John.
lot of ranting.
Right, I deleted the John Smith one because it's all me talking about how he's a pedophile and how I'm glad that he died of syphilitis.
Right.
But you know, that apparently gets people mad when I say stuff like that. So, tough shit.
Tough shit, get hit.
I enjoyed researching this because this is one of those. Yours is on hurricanes. Mine is on disappearing cities.
I mean, that's valid.
Was today okay? There wasn't a lot of death.
Yeah.
There was a lot of rape, but I didn't actually go into it.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm good.
okay.
Just still tired.
Yeah, I am too. But I think it's because I went to bed at like 11.
Probably. Mine's just post-anxiety exhaustion from the stress of the last couple of weeks.
Felt. So we are still doing scary stories, even though the month of October is already done.
I do have a cryptid for December.
Ooh, okay. It's not Krampus because we already covered him.
No.
Okay.
It ties in with a Yule.
Ooh.
So.
Ooh. Okay. All right. I'm fine with this. I had fun today.
I did. But only kind of.
Because we're both exhausted.
Well, no, I was going to say because the rape and pillaging.
Ah, yes. Ah, lovely. The colonizers. As always, guys, stay feral.
Bite the hand, guys.
And we'll see you all next time.
Okay, bye.
Next time on the Pandemonium Witches.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Death House Landlady.
The Death House Landlady.
So, the too long didn't read. She was an American serial killer in the 1980s. She ran a boarding house in Sacramento and murdered elderly and mentally disabled boarders. So her total body count reached 9 murders, but was only convicted of 3, and the jury was hung on the other 6. Newspapers dubbed her as the Death House Landlady.
That's a terrible name.
I know, right? I mean, there's definitely worse names they could have called her. Like, just being called the Death House Landlady is probably one of the nicer ones.
Probably, more than likely.